One day, a mum is out shopping, and dad is in charge of their 3-year-old daughter, Sally. Someone gave Sally a little tea set as a birthday gift, and it's one of her favorite toys. Daddy is in the living room, engrossed in the evening news, when Sally brings Daddy a little cup of tea, which was really just water. After several cups of tea and lots of praise for such yummy tea from Daddy, Mum comes home. Dad makes her wait in the living room to watch Sally bring him a cup of tea because it was just the cutest thing. Mum waits, and sure enough, Sally comes down the hall with a cup of tea for Daddy. She watches him drink it up and then says to him, "Did it ever occur to you that the only place Sally can reach to get water is the toilet?" Javier comes up to the Mexican border on his bicycle. He's got 2 large bags over his shoulders. The guard stops him and asks, "What's in the bags?" "Sand," answers Javier. The guard says, "Well, we'll just see about that. Get off the bike." The guard takes the bags and rips them apart. He empties them out and finds nothing in them but sand. He detains Javier overnight and has the sand analyzed, only to discover that there is nothing but pure sand in the bags. The guard releases Javier and puts the sand into new bags, hefts them onto the man's shoulders, and lets him cross the border. The next day, the same thing happens. The guard asks, "What have you got?" "Sand," says Javier. The guard does his thorough examination and discovers that the bags contain nothing but sand. He gives the sand back to Javier, and Javier crosses the border on his bicycle. This sequence of events is repeated day after day, every single day for a year. Eventually, Javier is never seen crossing the border again. Years pass, and by coincidence, the guard happens to see Javier in a cantina in Mexico. "Hey buddy," says the guard, "I know you are smuggling something. It's driving me crazy. It's all I think about. I can't even sleep. So, just between you and me, what were you smuggling?" Javier sips his beer and replies, "Bicycles." 2 attorneys boarded a flight out of Seattle. One sat in the window seat, the other sat in the middle seat. Just before takeoff, a physician got on and took the aisle seat next to the 2 attorneys. The physician kicked off his shoes, wiggled his toes, and was settling in when the attorney in the window seat said, "I think I'll get up and get a Coke." "No problem," said the physician. "I'll get it for you." While he was gone, one of the attorneys picked up the physician's shoe and spat in it. When he returned with the Coke, the other attorney said, "That looks good. I think I'll have one too." Again, the physician obligingly went to fetch it, and while he was gone, the other attorney picked up the other shoe and spat in it. The physician returned, and they all sat back and enjoyed the flight. As the plane was landing, the physician slipped his feet into his shoes and knew immediately what had happened. "How long must this go on?" he asked. "This fighting between our professions, this hatred, this animosity, this spitting in shoes, and pissing in Cokes." A tribal chief down on his luck decided to marry off his 3 daughters, for in those days suitors paid a bridal price, and the chief thought he could live off what his daughters would fetch him, and at the same time ensure that his children would be secure and provided for. Now, it was a point of rivalry between the girls to see who would fetch the best price among them for their father. After arguing about it for days, they would finally see who was worth the most. The eldest was first and was the most beautiful of the 3. Her prospective groom came forward and presented her father with a gorgeous she-cow, sleek and fat, the pride of the valley's herds. The second daughter was not so comely, but handsome in her own right, and when her suitor came forward, he offered the father a likely-looking young goat, strong and lively, a fine prize for any household. The third daughter stepped forward. Her future husband took one look at her and then presented a single scrawny chicken, the saddest, sorriest thing anyone had ever seen. With most of its feathers gone, walked with a limp, and only had one eye. The third daughter was furious, but before she could say anything, her father took out a huge hunting knife, leapt forward without a word, and started hacking away at the pathetic bird mercilessly. "That's right," the third daughter hooted. "You will pay for this grievous insult to my honor." "Shut up," her father shouted. "I'm trying to give the man his change." John works hard for his living, so his wife decides he deserves a special treat for his birthday. One night, she blindfolds him and takes him to a local strip club. The doorman at the club greets them and says, "Hey John, how are you doing?" His wife thinks this is a little strange. Once inside, John's wife removes the blindfold and asks him if he's ever been to this club before. "Oh no," says John. "He's one of the security guys I meet on my business trips." After they are seated, a waitress asks John if he'd like his usual and brings over a Budweiser. His wife is becoming increasingly uncomfortable and asks, "How did she know that you drink Budweiser?" "Oh, I recognize her. She's the waitress at the bar around the corner from work. I always drop in there and have a Bud on Fridays," replies John. Next, a stripper comes over to their table, throws her arms around John, and says, "Hi, Johnny, want your usual table dance?" John's wife, now furious, grabs her purse and storms out of the club. John follows her and spots her getting into a cab. Before she can slam the door, he jumps in beside her. John tries desperately to explain how the stripper must have mistaken him for someone else, but his wife is having none of it. She is screaming at him at the top of her lungs, calling him every name in the book. Just then, the cabbie turns around and says, "Geez, John, you picked up a real piece of work this time." An old preacher was dying. He sent a message for 2 church members, a banker and a lawyer, to come to his home. When they arrived, they were ushered to his bedroom. As they entered the room, the preacher held out his hands, then motioned for them to sit on each side of the bed. The preacher grasped their hands, sighed contentedly, smiled, and stared at the ceiling. For a time, no one said anything. Both the banker and lawyer were touched and flattered that the preacher would ask them to be with him during his final moments. However, they were also puzzled, as the preacher had never given them any indication that he particularly liked either of them. They both remembered his many long, uncomfortable sermons about greed, covetousness, and avaricious behavior that made them squirm in their seats. Finally, the banker said, "Preacher, why did you ask us to come?" The old preacher mustered up his strength, then weakly said, "I want to die as Jesus died." My friends, if you want to watch other funny jokes, subscribe to the channel.